if you're retired but not ready to retire from life, if you're tired of feeling that getting old is a curse, and if you really like to make the second half of life the best yet, then today you're in for a treat. I'm really honoured to have Dr. Kerry Burnight with us today. And Dr. Kerry has spent a long, long time um, with elder people, and she is considered America's gerontologist, which is a big word. And we're going to ask Dr. Kerry to let us know what this actually means, right? Because we want to understand big words. And in a nutshell, we have lifespan, we have health span, but nobody really talks about Joyspan. And this is what we're going to talk today about quality of life over living at all costs. So thank you, Kerry, for joining us.
Well,
So
thank you. I'm so delighted. I love your work, and I came across the outstanding work that you're doing, and I knew we had to meet. So I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
thank you. So let's I don't know, we could start anywhere whatsoever, but let's start with this channel is called Vibrant Elderhood, no? And for me, joy is a big part of this vibrancy in elderhood. And with all these years that you've been working as a gerontologist, how does this what is vibrancy? What is joy? When does it disappear? How does it come back again? Uh Use it as an excuse to tell about yourself as well, Kerry.
Oh, thank you. Well, these are just the kinds of questions I think about. And so, yeah, a gerontologist is somebody who studies the aging process. So, the biology, the psychology, the economics, the public policy. There's really so much about growing older. And so, I've been doing it for about 36 years now. And the greatest thing is just the learning because I'm around people in their 80s, 90s, and 100s. And so I've been kind of like a front row seat in the aging journey of humans. And it's been so fascinating. And I, for example, was working with someone, and this happens all the time. It's two, in this case, women who were the same age. They had the same socioeconomic status. They had the same medical conditions. They were both recent widows. You know, from the outside in, you would think, well, yeah, these two are about the same. But the experience of being with them, you had one who was utterly vibrant and vital and enjoying life and growing, and everybody wanted to be around her, myself included. And then the same woman who was just suffering so much. And there was such grief and such resignation and such heartbreak. And I wanted to understand, like, how do we, how do these paths kind of unfold in our lives, and kind of selfishly, like, what will my path be like? You
Yeah, of
know,
course.
I can imagine, taking either way. So with that, I didn't start with the positive part of it. I didn't start on the joy side at all. I actually, for the first 20 years of my research, it was all on depression, dementia, financial exploitation, elder abuse, neglect, and self-neglect. So it was because I felt like I was trying to serve people who were suffering the most. And it was meaningful work, and it broke my heart every single day. And I would come home from work crying so hard at the suffering and the loneliness and the humility. I mean, sorry, the humiliation of what people were experiencing. And I thought that I would do that work forever. because sadly, there was such a need for it. There were so many people who were suffering so much. And then I took a pivot, and I don't know if you've had this experience where I was flying on an airplane, and sometimes I feel like because there's no distractions, sometimes you can do some really good thinking on long airplane rides. And I had just received this prestigious award from the US Attorney General about serving victims of elder abuse. And rather than feeling, proud about it, I actually felt sick that I didn't get there early enough, right? I attended to the suffering, but we could prevent the suffering earlier in life a little bit before these circumstances unfolded. And so then I got obsessed with digging it into the research of what is well-being in longevity? What does it mean to experience joy in old age? And the more I got into it, there's research out there from all over the world. Research from Asian countries who are ahead of us in their aging process, research that I know you are familiar with about awe, about playfulness, about gratitude, about humor, resilience. And there's so much to it. And so I just became obsessed with it and hoped that I could make enough sense to someday organize it into a book that was not an academic book, that was instead in regular bookstores, and that we could sort of talk about the issue. So that is where this book Joyspan came from. And I didn't have a word for it at the time. So I was just thinking of it as well-being in old age. But then, as you said, we do have a word of how long your life is, lifespan. We have a word about your physical health and your cognitive health, health span. That was in the 1980s. And so I was trying in the beginning to think about well-being span, but that is not very catchy. And then I tried well span, and that sounds like wealth span, like your
Yeah.
money, which is also, something. So when I looked up in the American Psychological Association, the word joy is defined as well-being and life satisfaction. And I thought, oh, actually, joy is a little different from happy. So happy can be defined as our reaction to circumstances, right? And so this happens and you're happy, and then this happens and you're not happy, and then this happens. But with aging, a lot of hard things happen. And so the conceptualization of joy, as defined by a lot of contemplative thinkers like the Dalai Lama and the Catholic Archbishop Desmond Tutu, um, joy as contentment, joy as this inner well-being that you can maintain even when life grows very hard. And life does grow very hard. So sometimes people will say to me, "Well, isn't it just toxic positivity and denial of grief?" Actually, no, it's the opposite. It's the recognition that with old age comes, of course, comes death, comes disease, both acute and chronic disease, comes the loss of our friends and our partners. So, and then we can go to the next question, but it seemed like either there was a path of suffering to take that situation that you're in and remain in it, and then to suffer for the next 1 to 20, 30 years, or it would be, gosh, could we find a way to fortify ourselves for these new 100-year lives? And in fact, the research says yes, that we have much more choice in how we experience old age than we ever thought possible.
Excellent. So this was So when you looked at the cause, the like how we could prevent, not just prevent it, but take a different course, no? And
Yes.
was it fortifying means lots of different things. It means physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yes, I'm so glad you said fortify because I was thinking about that. So I think the best way to explain it is to use the physical body. So we fortify our physical body with strength, right? And the strength vocabulary that we use is cardiovascular. So we're going to make sure our heart is, working. Strength, we need to make sure that our muscles are continuing and that we're working on muscle strength. um, Flexibility, because without flexibility by nature, that's why people shuffle, is because they lose that flexibility. And then the fourth component of external strength is equilibrium or balance. So
Yes.
so there are these four areas, and people understand it because media talks about it all the time. So yes, we are lifting weights, we're walking, we're doing yoga, we are practicing our balance, and I am delighted about it. It fortifies you for 100-year life. So that's the structure. Now, internal strength is the same thing. We can fortify ourselves for these long lives by doing things that the research show us fortifies your internal strength. And those two group into four areas. And those four areas that I use are, first of all, growing, like to make sure that we're continuing to grow. And I know that your offerings and studies and retreats have a lot to do with continued growth. Um, Connect. So the next one is making sure that we're connecting with other people, and that this Harvard longitudinal study showed us that it was the biggest predictor was the quality of our relationships, our that humans need connection. Even those of us who are introverts, we still need meaningful connection. So far we have grow, connect, and then the next one is adapt. So what we've learned is that it, in order to enjoy longevity, in order to maximize our joy span, it is required that we are both willing and able to adapt to what life brings our way. I haven't ever known anyone who has gone all the way through life and not had some very real challenges. And so when people say to me, I'll be as happy as long as I'm healthy, I think, oh no, because don't rest it there, right? So adapting is from great research in Israel when they were showing about how people adapt to, for example, the death of a spouse, or adapt to losing your vision, or adapt to a big and tough diagnosis like ALS, or for some of the more painful forms of cancer. And adapting is actually something that isn't just luck, it's actually a skill that you can cultivate. So the literature is largely grouped in the coping literature about external and internal coping mechanisms that have been proven to help us adapt to life's challenges. And then the final one of the four, so it starts with a G and it ends with a G, and the middle two letters are CA. And I'm from California, so it works for me. I wish it spelled out a word. And was writing the book, I tried every acronym. And I sometimes I was close. Like I had one that was core, and one that was love, and one that was I joy. But the reality is I finally just thought I need to just go with the words that I'm finding from the research. So that's why it's not a very clever acronym. But It starts with a G, ends with a G, and the last G is give. So people with long joy spans are people who have recognized that throughout life, there is a human imperative to give, and that we always have something to give. Society tells us that when we're older, oh, you don't have as much to give. You're less relevant, less attractive, less funny, less playful, less, and it simply isn't true. It's because there's a $60 billion anti-aging industry that profits when we lose sight of the fact that all life long we have value. And, I have a patient now, and what she's giving is her ability to listen. And so her whole life, she had been a person, she was a teacher, she was great at talking. But as she got older, she realized, I'd like to grow in my ability to listen, and that is what I'm going to give. So at present, she is confined to a bed because she's quite contracted. But my goodness, every time I go to visit her, people are gathered around her bed and they are sharing, and she is engaged and listening. And it gave me such great hope that we always have something so important to give, particularly in these trying times where AI is taking away the sort of humanity part to it. Older future us is even more needed. So the fact that as we get older, we can tap into greater humility, potentially greater spirituality, appreciation of music and art and nature and playfulness, and not being so beholden to the attitudes or judgment of others, and our problem solving. So there's so much that can get better as we get older, and we can then use that to give all life long. And it's also the purpose literature. There's a lot of study on purpose. And um, an amazing study that I followed showed that people who identified as feeling like they have purpose in life had less inflammation and better antiviral load, even holding constant all of the medical and um, exercise and age and all these kinds of things. And that's how important it is. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And do you think that the purpose piece is what gives us the motivation to fortify ourselves and to want to give?
I think that I know that they all go in the same direction. So it's kind of like where you want to enter, because interestingly, when you, and it's not big changes, it's like little small shifts in our thinking. Humans have about 60,000 thoughts per day. And those thoughts are sort of like the cells of our body. And in these thoughts of thinking, um, you know, first of all, needing to reject the lie that old is bad, right? So, in terms of, you may think, gosh, I'm not sure at present really like what my purpose is now that I am retired, now that my kids don't, seem to need my sage counsel as much. Um, and so you may identify like, I wonder what my give would be. But in doing that, often like taking that small effort to think about what you would like to give, often that does then promote um, connection, and it does then promote growth. And then we're learning to adapt. So I find people start at different ways in, but they all seem to, and I'm happy about that, because it would be such a shame if one thing you did this and then that made that, but they just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
physical health seems to go in the same direction, so does internal health.
Yeah, and I find this very encouraging because it what we're essentially encouraging folk is to start somewhere. Start with these, start reflecting even, no? Start reflecting on these
Yes.
things.
Yeah, and maybe the first start is just to recognize the lie that we've been fed ever since we were born. So every single one of us, you think about like the stories, the fairy tales that our parents and I did this too to my own children. You read a story and there was this terrible old witch and she was going to eat the children and she was so ugly and awful. Like we we fed a steady diet of this kind of age is bad kind of thing. And when you talk to older people, they think, gosh, that hasn't been my experience.
Mm, excellent. Um, I've got lots of other questions I want to ask you. I think I want to dive a little bit into this whole concept of longevity because it's there. We have lifespan, health span, joy span. Um, it's almost like I get the idea. It's if we focus on joy span, then we're going to be more healthy. And it's not automatically we're going to live longer, but we're going to have longer, like well-lived lives. And what does it really mean, though, to focus on joy as a quality? Um,
Well, this is where I turn it back to you because I am so interested in the what you put on. And so I think maybe if I could ask you to tell me a little bit about what you've learned when people come to your events. For some people don't know about the events, and I'd love to learn
yeah,
more.
sure. So I talk a lot about the playful path, which I've come to seeing as it's three circles that intersect. We have a vibrant body, which is how alive we feel on our body, which is through movement, through what we eat. It's reducing toxic input, like really poisons in the house. People have under the kitchen sink. They have all these things that don't do them any good at all, or toxic
Yes.
paints on the wall, or even like fillings. They're poisoning our bodies. So anyway, get all this out and to free up our body, and that just frees up energy already. And then we have a joyful mind, which is having a greater outlook on life. It's about being able to talk to ourselves
Yes.
because we don't know how to talk to ourselves. We say either I can't, I can't, I can't, or we say I should or I should. And both of them, it is coming back to the thing that you're not good enough or you're not
Yes.
able to. Or so to see ourselves doing things rather than saying no, no, no. Just imagine yourself that you could do something. Anyway, that's the joyful mind. There's the capacities of the mind to, and then the third one is this all about relationships, is about opening our heart, like a loving heart, what this means. And these three things, they all go together in a straight they're all connected. Like, but the funniest thing I find that without the heart component, we become what people call spiritual assholes. You
Yes.
know?
Yes.
Because there's no empathy anymore. There's no empathy. And I think this is the piece that you're bringing in, this piece about empathy. Empathy is also like finding ways that I can give to other people.
Mm.
I've spoken to lots of people, they're afraid of listening too much because people unload too much on them and they don't know what to do with it, right? But I think you're saying listen and become a channel so that it flows through you, don't
Yes.
stop it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. So, a playful path that is mind, body, and spirit. Is that what you mind,
Mind, body, and
body,
heart.
and heart? Exactly. Like really the love component of it.
And
Yeah.
when we talk about play, I like to talk about play and play history. So that would be a way to find our purpose. So we have 8 or 9 play personalities, which go from obviously like a Joker kind of type to an explorer, to a collector, to an artist, to a director, performer, storyteller, competitor, even has a playful side. They all also have shadow sides, right? Like a
Yes.
competitor, if a competitor is only happy if they win, then that's the shadow side. But if he uses it to fuel his enthusiasm, her enthusiasm, then so anyway, to understand what our play personalities are can help direct our actions so that there's intrinsic pleasure to do them. That's
Yes.
the idea. And
And so
how
people,
we
Mhm.
and how we played as a child, that's when we were our most authentic. And as adults, this is we don't have to like if we're as a child we had Barbie dolls. I don't know. It doesn't mean as adults we have to play with Barbie dolls, but there's something there. There's care. Perhaps with dolls you looked after them, you gave made little houses for them, or I don't know. Or perhaps you would draw, you were drawing all the time, or perhaps you like to dance on top of tables, and just to find a little bit of what that looks like later on in life, if you abandon it, just gives us so much energy and joy, and just wake us up completely. We'll be like, "Whoa! I didn't know. I'd given up on myself." Right?
Yes, yes. And so you have, how long are these events that enable people to regain their playful
Yeah, I've
personality?
seen. I've offered play history sessions that are like 90 minutes online, and
Uh-huh.
even in that is enough to spark to spark it off. I personally like things that are longer, like 5 days or a week, at least.
Yes.
I like full immersion stuff, but
And where are they offered? Have they been, are they in Italy or are they in different
yeah,
parts?
mainly in Italy, mainly in Italy, and
Wow.
I have some like not I wouldn't say to call them crazy, but like I have a plan for like a pirate retreat where we're dressed as pirates for a week, where I grew up in Cornwall. It's not just random because pirates they have a special code of conduct and they're curious and they're bold and they're playful. Of course, they're not what do you call them? Ruthless.
Right, right.
They're because pirates they're interesting as archetypes. This is just one thing, right? They're interesting as archetypes because they set out to change their world, and changing their world, they changed lots of other things in our world. They were the first people to have social security, for example. If somebody lost their leg or their arm, they would be given money by the pirates.
Yes.
Things like this. It's funny. And
Yeah.
but yeah, and the other kind of the other part of the work is encouraging people to go off on a solo pilgrimages, which is start off somewhere very near to where you live that you've never been to before, and make it sacred. Go with a question. We carry these questions in our hearts, and we don't find answers for them. So
Yes.
to
Oh, that's so,
spend time for that. Mm.
that is beautiful. Oh, I love that. And then I think you have a book on this topic that you wrote. Is that?
I have a book called Pearls of Juggling, which is for jugglers, and I would always
Yes.
encourage people to learn to juggle because it's one of these things. Juggling is one of these things that we don't think we could do until we try it.
Right.
We really don't, and I for one was amazed that I could do it. I was like, no way, I'm doing this thing, and that all falls under sort of coordination exercise and all this. I wrote a book really about bringing the art into what could be something very technical, nerdy, and the other book is when I was 21 when I left the UK, which is essentially a pilgrimage that I didn't know I needed that I went on.
Wow. Oh, that sounds wonderful.
But there will be something more will come out in the playful path and all this, but it just takes so long. You know how long it takes to write the book.
But I think The Playful Path is a book that we need. So I know
Yeah.
that. A question I have about that, you were talking about looking to when we were children and we were free to pick the play. And I thought, what did I love to do? And I just loved to dance. every minute that I could, I would dance at home and dance in a dance class and make up a show and make a stage and dance and dance. And I have since, besides maybe weddings, I don't dance and I miss it, but I don't know how to find that playfulness or opportunity to dance again.
I think it's really much easier than it seems. You just put on music and dance.
Right. Just by yourself.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah. I mean, the definition, let's say, of fun is something that we do with other people. So, I wouldn't like come to an immediate conclusion right now. I would hold that as a question for a little while.
yes.
But
Yes.
but that's an important part of your life, and you need it definitely.
Yes, I do. And maybe you just by calling attention to it, and
Yeah.
that's what you're doing with people, of calling attention to that in this second half of our life. Don't drop what humans need. Humans need that. It's like saying, oh, I forgot to eat in the second half of my life. Like, no, you need to keep
Oh no,
eating.
it's really really important to cultivate these things, and
Yeah.
there are various people that talk about what sort of how it is in retirement, and there's the experimental phase, but when it's directed by how we used to play, it becomes much more, we find the things easier. We don't have to, we
Yes.
don't do all the run-of-the-mill things. um
That. I love that.
Kerry,
Yeah,
sorry.
I would just say my husband, when he was young, he said he would always be drawing kind of like plans of houses and castles and things. And so that he wondered if he should be an architect, and he did not end up doing that. But I think now in our second half of life, maybe that could be a clue for him.
Of course, absolutely, absolutely. It
Yeah.
could be, because architecture could be very useful as well. It's not just, it can also be very um not thinking of people in mind. There's a whole movement around happy cities. Maybe that's the kind of thing for him.
Yes. Yes.
Designing places where people can actually meet, and and hospitals that have sunlight that come in that disinfect them naturally.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
all so I this is the last question I would like to talk about with you today, is really about this thing about elder elderhood, becoming an elder, and perhaps even legacy. It's the society needs what the elderly have to offer. We need
Yes.
that wisdom so badly, and when we step into it, many of the maladies, we really address a lot of the maladies in the world. I'd really like you to address this a little while.
Yes. Again, I've been so lucky to watch people in different parts of the world step into owning this version of themselves. So instead of trying to stay young or retain what we used to be, if we can say, no, that is marketing. And the reality is stepping in to this current version, this version that, yeah, looks different and is embracing gray hair, embracing bodies that move differently, embracing different interests. When you step into your power, it is staggering and it is beautiful and hopeful and radiant. And it's kind of like the lights come on inside of people when they realize that. And a lot of times it comes when people recognize the internal narrative that's been preventing them. And a lot of times it is the thought of, oh gosh, I would experience joy, except I have this diagnosis, I have this pain, I lost my partner, all the like heaviness that we carry, we we have framed it that is going to prevent us. And that secretly, I think a lot of times we think, well, it's not really fair. Like, hard things happen to me. And because I'm carrying all these hard things, I can't like other people can. But what I know as a gerontologist is that all people are carrying hard things. So I'll give you an example in real life, which is my own mother is now 97. And she has been practicing what we're talking about, proactively cultivating her mind, body, and spirit in a way that is fortifying her joy and prioritizing her joy. And it's put her on a different path. And so when people see her now, they say, "Oh, she's just so lucky. She's just lucky." That's just good genes. But what we know from the research is that our genetic expression, it's only predicts between 14 and 25% of our aging experience. The other is these little practices. And so and then they'll look at her and say, well, she doesn't have anything wrong with her. Easy for her to say, but I got this, and this. So I like to share. I like to encourage my mom to share, to say, tell people about you. And so she says, well, I did go through bankruptcy. My son did have leukemia. My husband did die. I do have congestive heart failure. I live with full body osteoarthritis. That makes it quite painful. And yet, I'm not those things because I recognize the choice. And the choice is to carry this hard thing that has broken your heart and then suffer for the rest of your life, which people choose all the time and they don't realize that they're making that choice. Or you can say, I am carrying these things and I choose to put the effort in because if I'm going to be alive, I might as well find some joy instead of just leaning into the suffering. And that is so hopeful and it's not anything new. And the person who articulated it the very best, in my opinion, is Viktor Frankl in his
Mm.
book, Man's Search for Meaning, because he was a physician who was put in a concentration camp, more suffering than I think I could ever even imagine the suffering of being in a concentration camp. And yet, what he wrote was, regardless of these circumstances, I always can maintain spiritual freedom. I can always find a place that is not those things that I carry, but it is instead my choice. It is my love of people. It is my giving and my purpose and my connection and my playfulness and my awe. And these are the very things that people talk about at our funerals. So, as a gerontologist, I go to tons of funerals because it's just an occupational um, gift. And every time it reminds me what lasts, what your legacy is. And it isn't money and it isn't prestige and it certainly isn't your abs or your muscles or your smooth face. It is these internal characteristics. They would say, Anthony really heard me when I was talking. Anthony recognized that I needed a ride to my chemotherapy and he offered, could I pick you up and take you there? I mean, these are the things that people talk about. And this is the crux of Joyspan. And it feels hopeful because it is hopeful and it's accessible to anybody. And everybody needs to make a choice and put in the work that they want to find joy in old age. Because if I was with a woman yesterday and after her husband died, she said, and she said it yesterday too, I will never enjoy my life again. She's right. That's a choice and she is making it. And so I said, is that what you want? And she said, no. And I said, so then you could pick a different path, right? And she goes, I don't know if I could. And I said, happily you can, because it's little tiny things. So the little change that we implemented for her yesterday was, I said, tell me about when you first wake up in the morning. And she's, I think now 86. And she said, well, I open my eyes and I think about these things I need to do. And I think about, oh, my hip hurts. I need to go pay my taxes. I need to call my daughter who is I'm having an argument with. And she's focused on all the negative parts to it. But the way that our brain works, the reticular activating system is what you choose to look at is what you see more of. It's the reason why you buy a certain car and then you see them everywhere you look. They've been there all along, you're just seeing them. So for her, it was just that step one was that shift of tomorrow, before your feet hit the ground, list on your hands 10 things. So maybe it would be something on your body that is not hurting. Maybe it's the fact you're going to go down and have a cup of tea. Maybe it is that, oh, you have a bed. Thank heaven I have a bed and a pillow, right? So she listed out these 10 things and then she did call me and say, that sounded like hocus pocus, but I feel different as a result of how I did this little reset on how I saw my life at 86 years old. And she said, and when I realized there is a chance to cultivate joy, it changed what the day looked like. So I feel really, really hopeful. And I think that each of the people that you work with and each like us and the people who are listening to this recording, we are the ambassadors of this new era of growing older, the new longevity, the longevity that isn't just about trying to live 150 years. Like that's quantity, but we are leaning into quality, and that feels really hopeful.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not
I
gonna
want to
add.
go to your retreat. How can I find out more about how I can go to your retreats?
Oh, anthonytrahair.com, my name. But
Okay.
Kerry, and to everybody that's watching, if you've come this far, watch this video again. There was just so much. You've just said so much in a simple, practical way to make everybody's life after 50, even earlier, better. It's not just improving yourself; it has ripple effects.
It does. It does. And we used to think like there was a time where, oh, women can't do this or that. And then over time, women said, yeah, yes, we can. And they did. And I hope that, and it feels like we're going to look back and think, wow, we changed the narrative around aging one person at a time, and that's going to make it better for the people who come behind us. So, I want my 28-year-old son to say, I look forward to being in my 60s, 70s, and 80s because they've had some role models. And we can be those role models, not because it's easy, but because we've chosen to put in the work with our mind, body, and spirit in order to use the gift, like not waste it. If we're alive, we have a job to do. We have giving and hope to do for the world. So don't waste it.